Imagine you're a baby sea turtle, freshly hatched on a moonlit beach. You instinctively know to follow your siblings toward the ocean. But tonight something's different. A small mechanical creature that looks exactly like you begins waddling ahead, and you follow. It's guiding you past dangerous obstacles around predators, directly to the safest path to the water. Your survival chances just increased, dramatically thanks to a robot designed by scientists at the University of Notre Dame. Or imagine you're a robotic betta fish swimming through the reefs of the Maldives. You're indistinguishable from the real fish around you. Your mission? Guide an endangered school of fish away from illegal fishing nets. Or perhaps you're a robotic deer standing beside a California road at night, designed to look so realistic that poachers pull the trigger only to find themselves arrested by hidden game wardens using you as bait. This isn't science fiction. According to research published in December 2024 in the journal Frontiers in Marine Science, scientists are already deploying AI-powered, animal-inspired robots for ecological conservation worldwide. Robotic fish are learning to mimic endangered species behavior so convincingly that real fish accept them as members of their schools. Robotic sea turtles are being developed to guide hatchlings to safety. Robotic predators deter poachers. Robotic birds might soon guide migrating flocks away from turbines and power lines. But here asks the question that's dividing the conservation community. Just because we can build robots that manipulate animal behavior, does that mean we should? What happens when we teach wild animals to trust and follow artificial proxies? What are the long-term consequences of introducing deceptive technology into ecosystems that evolved without it? Where's the ethical line between conservation, innovation, and playing God with nature? This is the story of humanity's newest conservation frontier, robotic animal proxies, and why some scientists believe this emerging technology could save endangered species while others warn it might fundamentally alter what it means to be wild. Let's find out together. Right now, across laboratories and conservation sites worldwide, engineers and biologists are collaborating on projects that sound like they belong in a Michael Crichton novel. At the University of Notre Dame, researchers have built robotic sea turtle hatchlings that perfectly mimic the waddling gait of real baby turtles. At MIT and Wood's Whole Oceanographic Institution, scientists created a robotic fish called Finnegan with 4 flapping foils that swim exactly like real sea turtles. In Germany, researchers developed robotic fish that can infiltrate zebrafish schools and influence their collective behavior. And in Wisconsin, a taxidermist named Brian Wolslegel has spent 30 years creating over 3,000 robotic animal decoys. Elk, turkeys, bears used by law enforcement to catch poachers. These aren't crude mechanical toys. These are sophisticated biomimetic robots equipped with AI, advanced sensors, thermal imaging capabilities, and the ability to learn and replicate species-specific behaviors. Some can produce realistic heat signatures to fool thermal scopes. Others can move their ears, tails, and heads with such lifelike precision that wild animals cannot distinguish them from real members of their species. Stated goals are noble: protect endangered species, deter poaching, guide animals away from danger, study behavior without invasive experimentation, and intervene in conservation crises where human presence would cause more harm than good. But the implications are staggering, and the ethical framework for deploying these technologies barely exists. Here's what makes robotic animal proxies so powerful and so controversial. Traditional conservation relies on observation, habitat protection, and minimizing human interference. The philosophy has always been protect ecosystems and let nature take its course. But robotic proxies represent a fundamentally different, proactive manipulation of animal behavior using deceptive technology. Consider the robotic sea turtle hatchling project at Notre Dame, led by Assistant Professor Yasmin Oskanaden. The stated purpose is heartbreaking. Only 1 in 1,000 baby sea turtles survive the journey from nest to ocean. Predators including crabs, birds, and fish hunt them relentlessly. Eroding beaches, light pollution from coastal development, and climate change have made survival even more unlikely. The robot, an amalgamation of multiple sea turtle species, including loggerhead and leatherback turtles, is designed to guide hatchlings safely to the water. The oval-shaped body frame, 4 independently servo-actuated silicon flippers, Arduino-based control unit, IMU sensor, and battery allow it to move across sand exactly like a real hatchling. In testing, the robot successfully navigated various sand densities and inclines, mimicking the adaptive locomotion of real turtles. The vision is this: Deploy robot guides during hatching events to lead baby turtles along the safest paths, away from predators and obstacles directly to the ocean. It could save thousands of lives per year. 6 of 7 sea turtle species are threatened or endangered, so every hatchling matters. The technology seems like a miracle solution, but scientists studying animal-robot interaction are raising profound concerns. Research published in 2024 in the journal Animal Behavior and Cognition warns that introducing robots mimicking conspecifics members of the same species raises ethical concerns about manipulation of animal behavior and potential for unintended long-term consequences, such as dependency or altered social structures within populations. What happens if sea turtle hatchlings become dependent on robotic guides? What if they learn to wait for mechanical leaders instead of following their natural instincts? Sea turtles have evolved over 100 million years, with innate navigation abilities tied to magnetic fields, wave patterns, and visual cues. If we override those instincts with artificial guidance, are we helping or harming the species long-term? And there's a darker possibility that few scientists want to discuss publicly. What if the technology falls into the wrong hands? The same robots designed to guide turtles to safety could be reprogrammed to lead them into traps. The same AI that learns to mimic fish behavior for conservation could be weaponized by illegal fishing operations to lure endangered species into nets. This isn't paranoid speculation. A 2023 study, published in the American Bar Association's journal on AI and Animal Communication, explicitly warns poachers could use AI-generated vocalizations to lure target species, increasing their effectiveness in capturing or killing wildlife. The same logic applies to robotic decoys. Technology designed for protection can always be reverse-engineered for exploitation. The ethical complexity deepens when we examine how robots are already being used to manipulate predator behavior. Researchers have deployed robotic predators and adaptive deterrent systems to influence carnivore behavior, particularly in agricultural areas where livestock face predation threats. In controlled experiments published in 2023, scientists tested robotic coyote deterrents with 3 levels of sophistication: light only, predetermined movement moving at set times and set patterns, and adaptive movement moving in response to approaching coyotes. The adaptive robots, equipped with GPS route following, RGB and thermal camera image recognition, and real-time AI image processing, dramatically reduced predation on bait compared to static deterrents. The implications are significant. Robots can effectively frighten predators away from protected areas, reducing human-wildlife conflict without lethal control. Ranchers could deploy robotic guards instead of killing coyotes, wolves, or bears. It's humane, effective, and scalable. But consider what this means from the predator's perspective. These animals are being trained through negative reinforcement to fear artificial entities that don't exist. Naturally, in their environment, we're conditioning wild carnivores to modify their behavior based on stimuli that have no ecological basis. Over generations, could this create selection pressure for animals that can distinguish real threats from robotic ones? Or worse, could it create generalized fear responses that compromise predators' ability to hunt effectively, leading to starvation and population decline? And there is another dimension. The robots that have already been deployed for decades with almost no ethical oversight. Brian Wohl's Legal-esque custom robotic wildlife has created over 3,000 robotic animal decoys. For law enforcement since the 1990s, these taxidermied robots move their tails, heads, ears, and legs, swivel on bases, and slide along aluminum tracks. The most sophisticated models produce realistic heat signatures to fool thermal scopes that poachers increasingly use. Wildlife officials deploy these decoys in areas with suspected poaching activity. Hidden officers with cameras watch as illegal hunters shoot the robots, then immediately arrest them. According to the Humane Society Wildlife Land Trust, which has donated 30 decoys to federal and state agencies since 2004, wildlife agencies make up to $30,000 in fines per decoy. The robots have helped catch hundreds of poachers and saved countless real animals. This use case seems ethically straightforward. Robots as tools for law enforcement, harming no one except criminals. But it's worth considering that these robots succeed precisely because they perfectly deceive wild animals and humans alike. They occupy an ethical gray zone where deception is used for beneficial purposes, but deception nonetheless. The most controversial applications involve robots that actively integrate into wild animal populations to influence collective behavior. Research published in 2024 demonstrates that robotic fish can be accepted as conspecifics by real fish when the robots learn and replicate species-specific behaviors. Scientists at institutions across Europe have deployed robotic fish among zebrafish schools, demonstrating that robot speed influences group cohesion and speed without inducing stress responses. The robots are so convincing that fish accept them as part of the group, following their lead. Researchers propose using this technology to direct migratory fish away from dangerous areas like dam turbines, guide them through fish ladders, or influence spawning patterns to support population recovery. But this is where many ethicists draw the line. We're no longer just observing or protecting wildlife, we're actively manipulating their behavior using deception. The fish don't know they're following a robot. They think they're following a member of their own species. We're exploiting their evolved social behaviors for our purposes, even if those purposes are conservation. The precedent this sets is deeply troubling. If we accept that it's ethical to manipulate animal behavior through robotic deception for conservation, what other manipulations become acceptable? Could zoos deploy robotic animals to make captive populations behave more naturally? Could agricultural operations use robotic animals to calm livestock before slaughter? Could researchers manipulate wild animal social structures to study outcomes without the animals knowing they're in an experiment? These questions touch on fundamental issues of animal autonomy, dignity, and what philosopher Martha Nussbaum calls the capabilities approach. To animal ethics, the idea that animals have inherent capabilities and that human interventions should support those capabilities rather than manipulate them for human purposes. Drones used for wildlife monitoring have been reported to elicit avoidance or distress responses in seabirds and large mammals. The physical presence of robots in sensitive habitats can lead to habitat degradation or disturb nesting and foraging activities. Second, dependency and altered social structures. If animals become dependent on robotic guides, leaders, or protectors, their natural behaviors may atrophy. Young animals that learn to follow robotic leaders instead of experienced adults may not develop the knowledge and skills necessary for survival without technological assistance. Third, evolutionary consequences. If robotic deterrence creates strong selection pressure, predators that can distinguish robots from real threats may have survival advantages. Over generations, this could lead to robot-smart populations that ignore deterrence, rendering the technology useless and potentially creating super predators that have learned to ignore warning signals. Fourth, ecosystem disruption. Removing or reducing predation pressure through robotic deterrence could cause prey populations to explode, leading to overgrazing, habitat degradation, and cascading ecological effects. Nature's balance often depends on predation, and interfering with that balance, even for good reasons, can have unintended consequences. Fifth, the weaponization risk. Every conservation technology can be reverse-engineered for exploitation. Robotic decoys designed to save endangered species could be reprogrammed to hunt them. AI systems that learn animal communication could be used to manipulate, trap, or harm wildlife. The current regulatory framework is almost non-existent. There are no international treaties governing robotic animal proxies, no standardized ethical review processes for deploying robots in wild habitats, no requirements for long-term monitoring of ecological impacts, no mechanisms for ensuring technology doesn't spread to bad actors. Compare this to other areas of emerging technology. Gene editing faces stringent international regulations through frameworks like the Cartagena Protocol. Artificial intelligence development is increasingly subject to ethical guidelines and government oversight, but robotic wildlife manipulation is happening right now in dozens of countries, with almost no public awareness or democratic input into whether it should be allowed. Some scientists argue that the urgency of conservation crises justifies rapid deployment of any technology that might help. With over 1 million species facing extinction, with climate change accelerating habitat loss, with poaching threatening iconic megafauna, we don't have time for lengthy ethical debates. If robots can save species, we have a moral obligation to use them. But others counter that this emergency ethics approach is how we VA justified every previous intervention that later proved disastrous. We introduced cane toads to control beetles without considering consequences. We moved species around the globe for pest control without understanding ecosystems. We've manipulated nature repeatedly with good intentions and catastrophic results. Why should robotic proxies be any different? The middle ground, advocated by many conservation biologists, is cautious, transparent experimentation with rigorous long-term monitoring. Deploy robotic technologies in limited, controlled contexts. Study the outcomes carefully over multiple generations. Involve ethicists, indigenous communities, and the public in decision-making. Develop international standards before the technology becomes ubiquitous. This approach is already being implemented in some contexts. The Hawaiian Crow Aloud project uses AI to compare vocalizations of captive birds with historical recordings to determine if critical calls related to predator awareness or courtship have been lost in captivity. The goal is to teach these calls back to the birds before reintroduction. This is robotic intervention, but with clear goals, transparent methods, and careful evaluation. Similarly, soft robotic sea turtles developed to study propulsion mechanisms explicitly replace animal experimentation. Instead of capturing and testing endangered turtles, researchers build robots that mimic their form and function. This approach gains scientific knowledge without harming live animals. It's using robotics to reduce animal suffering, not increase it. The distinction seems to be between passive observation, study, versus active behavioral manipulation. Robots that monitor, track, or replace animal testing raise fewer ethical red flags than robots that deceive wild animals into changing their natural behaviors. But even this distinction becomes murky in practice. The University of Notre Dame turtle guiding robot is meant to save lives, but it also actively manipulates hatchling behavior. Is that acceptable because it increases survival rates? What if survival rates increase but the saved turtles lack crucial skills they would have learned navigating to the ocean naturally? These aren't abstract philosophical questions. They have real consequences for the future of wildlife conservation and the relationship between humans and nature. Perhaps the deepest question is this: what does it mean to be wild in a world where robots can infiltrate, guide, protect, deter, and manipulate animal behavior without the animals knowing? Is a sea turtle that reaches the ocean with robotic guidance truly wild? Is a fish that spawns in a location chosen by robotic leaders exercising natural behavior? Is an ecosystem shaped by robotic deterrence still a natural ecosystem? The philosopher Holmes Rolston III argues that wildness is valuable precisely because it's autonomous from human control. Wilderness, he writes, is where nature is left free to spontaneously express itself. When we deploy robotic proxies that manipulate animal behavior, even for conservation, we're arguably destroying the very wildness we claim to protect. Others, like conservation biologist Michael Sal, argue that in the Anthropocene, the age of human-dominated Earth systems, pristine wildness no longer exists. Every ecosystem on the planet is influenced by human activity. In this context, active management using technology might be the only way to prevent extinctions and maintain biodiversity. The resolution to this tension will define 21st century conservation. Do we accept that humans must actively manage nature using every tool available, including deceptive robotics? Or do we draw lines around certain kinds of interventions as incompatible with preserving authentic wildness? The answer probably lies somewhere in between, specific to context and species. Robotic anti-poaching decoys that catch criminals while harming no wildlife. Ethically defensible. Robotic guides for critically endangered species with survival rates below 0.1%. Arguably justified as emergency intervention. Robotic predators to manipulate carnivore behavior for agricultural benefit. It's more ethically questionable. Robotic fish infiltrating schools to manipulate migration patterns. Deeply controversial. What's certain is that this technology is advancing far faster than ethical frameworks can keep pace. Scientists are already deploying robotic animal proxies worldwide. Companies are commercializing biomimetic robots for conservation. The technology will become cheaper, more sophisticated, and more widespread. We need public awareness and democratic debate about whether this is the future we want for wildlife conservation. We need international agreements on acceptable and unacceptable uses. We need long-term studies of ecological and evolutionary consequences. We need ethical review boards with expertise in animal welfare, conservation biology, indigenous knowledge, and philosophy. Most importantly, we need humility. Every time humans have intervened in nature with confidence that we understood the consequences, we've been wrong. The history of conservation is littered with well-intentioned failures. Robotic animal proxies offer extraordinary potential to save species, but they also carry risks we're only beginning to understand. If this story challenged your assumptions about conservation technology, if you had no idea that scientists are building robot animals to manipulate wildlife behavior, then share it. Talk about it and demand that these decisions be made transparently with public input rather than behind laboratory doors. Let's make sure robotic conservation becomes a tool for preserving wildness, not another example of technological hubris that destroys what it was meant to save. What do you think? Is it ethical to use robotic animal proxies to manipulate wildlife behavior for conservation? Where should we draw the line between helpful intervention and playing God with nature? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss more thought-provoking conservation stories. Because when it comes to emerging technologies that could reshape our relationship with nature, the truth is always more complex than anyone expected, and the stakes are higher than we can imagine. Thanks for watching, and next time, we LSL explore another incredible ecological story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about conservation. Stay curious, stay wild,